Hey everybody in the reggae universe, welcome to A Conversation in Dub, hosted by me, Mark Ramondi.
And me, James Pasqua. This podcast is all about exploring the massive world of reggae and dub music, from its roots in Jamaica to its influence on various music genres worldwide.
This podcast also explores the intricacies of dub through insightful conversations, interviews with artists, and in-depth analysis of iconic tracks. We don't just talk about the music, but also the stories behind it, the techniques used in its production, and the social and political context that shaped its development.
Our goal is to promote mindful listening, taking you, the listener, on the journey the artist intended. Through this process, we hope to introduce you to new music or give you a new insight on music you already know and love.
This podcast is brought to you by Rootfire, a platform for reggae music worldwide with a mission to empower artists and nurture the community that supports them. You're here because you love reggae music and want to be a part of that community. We're here to help connect the dots.
If you have any feedback for us, be sure to email us at aconversationindub@gmail.com or message us on Facebook or Instagram at aconversationindub. We love hearing from you. Now,
let's get to the show.
This week, we're joined by a fellow reggae podcaster and producer from Queens, New York to the outskirts of the rolling hills of Kingston, Jamaica. It's Henry Karyo, a.k.a. Henry K., creator of Rootsland podcast and Kingston to Cali, the Limited podcast. Henry K., how are you?
Very well, James, Mark. So nice to be on the show. Honored. A fan of what you do. Like I was just mentioning, very honored to be on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, we're honored to have you. Thanks for taking the time. We know you're super busy, constantly making episodes. Where are you calling us from? Are you calling us from Jamaica or US?
No, I am not. I'm actually in South Florida right now, Deerfield Beach area.
Gotcha.
Which is
Nice.
Basically between Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, that area. East coast of Florida. So that's
Very
where
nice.
I have another studio up here, and this is where I come when I'm not in the rolling red hills.
Wow. That's awesome.
So it's been
Very
kind of
nice.
like a back and forth. Although since COVID, a little less in the rolling red hills, actually. So I'm trying to now get a little more of my foot back down in Jamaica.
Gotcha.
Love it, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I found the Rootsland podcast years ago, I guess when it came out, because there was only one season when I discovered it. What was that, 2021? You started doing that?
Yeah, just about 2021, I think February, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and I was living in Jersey. It was, I guess mid-pandemic, we're all bunkered down, and I was listening to that, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, why? I've never heard anybody talk about this. Like, I want more of it. And then I saw more seasons were coming because I thought it was just a limited thing, one season. And I was like, oh, I love this. But for listeners out there who may not be familiar with the Rootsland podcast, do you want to give like a brief background, like the elevator pitch of the Rootsland
Sure,
podcast?
it may be a little bit. It may be like the World Trade Center elevator.
Sure.
Maybe since we're not really in a rush.
We're
But anyway,
not.
so basically,
Absolutely.
it kind of documents my story as a reggae fan, a reggae producer. Starting out in college, I got an internship working for the great Gary Himmelfarb at Ross Records, known as Dr. Dread, which at the time one of the biggest independent reggae distribution companies in the world. And he in turn lined me up with an internship working for Tuff Gong in Jamaica for Mrs. Marley at the time. Bob Marley had already passed away. So basically, the podcast kind of documents my story from going to Jamaica or working at Ross Records and then working in Jamaica, and then for about a 20-year period where I lived and set up a studio in Kingston, fell in love, had a daughter, and just follows the whole journey all the way on through. And at the heart of it is also a friendship that I had with a fellow reggae fan like us who kind of joined me on my journey. He had passed away, overdosed since, but I guess the story in a way is an homage to him and, kind of completing the journey that he started and we started together. So it's a full circle.
That was not the World Trade Center elevator pitch. That was a very succinct one. But yeah, the Rootsland podcast, I mean, it's every season is like a new story too, like a new twist on your journey. It's really cool. I was wondering what made you go down the podcast route, because when listening to it, it's like an audiobook, right? Because it's like a scripted podcast. I was wondering if
Yes,
you ever
correct.
had any ideas of putting it in a book, but you chose podcast instead. Like, what was that decision like?
Well, it's interesting because I kind of semi-retired from the music business, let's say around 2014, 2015, after, various reasons. I don't want to put any spoilers, but upcoming seasons will get into it. But it was a time where Kingston got pretty violent. Not that it hadn't been violent previously, but it had gotten very, very violent. It was a new wave of violence. Some real stuff came very close to home. So I kind of, and plus the music business with downloading and streaming and all that stuff, the nature of the whole industry had changed. And, as a producer, a hired gun, someone who makes money on points, on record sales, once streaming stopped, my bread and butter was gone. And even though I had a studio, we also reached the point where, and as you know, with podcasting, you can go in a closet and record an album at the same quality as you would have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, in the day. So I decided to step out of music, and, always loved it and always kept talking about it. And, basically in my new career, I started a website, a transportation company where we did airport transportation. I had drivers, limousines and stuff like that. Did a lot of driving myself for years. And, eventually people would say, Henry, what did you do before you had this website and before you had the company, the car service? And I said, well, would you believe I was a reggae producer in Kingston, Jamaica, and worked for the Marley family? And people like, Grandma Teitelbaum was totally shocked when she heard that. She said, what? So, I spent years kind of just telling the stories from the beginning to the end, and people were fascinated and glued to them. And many people said you should write a book, or at some point put this down somehow. And then, as life converges, also being in the car a lot, I started listening to a lot of podcasts. This American Life, the NPR kind of, like you were talking about, the long form storytelling podcasts. At some point, I said to myself, I said, wait, I think I can do one of these. I have the engineering and the technical ability to it, and I've been telling these stories now for years. I kind of got them down. And my first call was to a friend of mine who I still work with down in Kingston, Jamaica, who I have a studio with, and I just threw the idea by him, and it all clicked. And like you said, it's mostly storytelling, but I think a big aspect of it is also kind of the dramas that I play out as well, where I kind of have the recreations where I bring in characters to kind of make you feel it a little more. I definitely didn't want to do any bad Jamaican accents during the course of the whole show, so I figured, all right, at some point I said, I'm going to ask actually Jamaicans to play these parts so I don't have to embarrass myself. And, it just so happens that my partner, Curly Locks, who's an artist down in Jamaica, is also a voice impersonator and, a lot of talented things in terms of, adding to the show. So it was just a perfect combination. And nice. I said, let's do it. And this was before COVID. I had done a pitch, like the elevator pitch. It was a 3-minute or 4-minute sequence, which actually begins the first episode, and it talks about how I moved to Jamaica, and with my friend Brian, we rented this house up in the hills of Kingston, and it became an artistic sanctuary. It was basically the story, and how he died of an overdose, and just kind of want to tell the story. So I did this pitch, and also before COVID, serendipitously, I ran into a friend of mine who connected me with the music website Consequence of Sound. I don't know if you've heard of them. Now they're called Consequence. But this was a pretty major website, Consequence of Sound, very independent. They're like kind of Pitchfork, have a big following. Yeah. And I played them the pitch, and they loved it. And we went in and we talked about distributing the show. And basically the first season went through them. But at some point, they kind of shifted their gears from Consequence of Sound. They kind of went a little more of a commercial route. They changed their name to Consequence, and the show no longer really fit with what they were doing. So I took it back independently and continued from there. But basically, that's the origin story of it.
That's great.
That's fantastic. I mean, I love that, to do something like that and to have these amazing, like, rich stories, it's got to seem so daunting in the beginning to say, I'm going to put this out there and then figure out the right way to do it. And especially like with it being a scripted podcast and the way that the stories flow and connect, I was wondering like how much prep was done before you were like, okay, I have the order of things, because you lived this. This was your life,
Right,
and
right.
I even know from my own life, right? It's jumbled a little bit with like when things happen and how one thing leads to another, especially the farther removed you get from the events. But because there's just such this cohesive thread, how much prep was it and how much lining up did you do before you were like, okay, we could start this project. I could actually start doing this.
Well, basically, I think once Consequence and us, we had the green light. I think I recorded the first 2 or 3 episodes and said, all right, I'll put, and we were doing every week, I think, at the beginning. I said, I'll put 3 or 4 weeks in the bank, and, this will give me time to kind of catch up. Of course, in no time at all, I was already through my 4 episodes, and then find myself like, all right, I got to record it, write and record one for this week. But, I did have, and people ask me that all the time. I do not have the greatest memory, but what I do have, which I was very lucky about, is, and starting at the very beginning, I had all this music I recorded at the very beginning when I first moved to Jamaica. Basically in the first 4 or 5 months that I was living in Kingston, I started going to the studio, and all these songs acted as a map for, dates and times and stories and memories. I remembered when I went in with Half Pint or with Bob Andy, at the very beginning at some of those early sessions. And, the DJ Dominic, who was one of the first I went with. I don't know if you ever heard of Dominic. We can talk about him in a second, a real character. But, when I just started my label in Kingston, and I remember, going down to the, printery to get the labels, and then having to go to Tuff Gong was distributing my music, and going to the pressing plant and picking up the 45s. And it's just, it's just through doing the music and looking back and listening back to the tapes and the recordings, even stuff that was never released, just demo stuff. It became my way of, like remembering all the times. It would instantly transport me back to the recording sessions, who I was in the studio with, how I got to the studio that day. It was just the perfect means to recall all that stuff.
What a
That's
full
amazing.
sentence that
Yeah,
you just said. Tuff Gong was, distributing my music, and I'd go and get the labels, and that's just like, really? That's crazy.
Yeah, no,
Right? Stuff
it
you'd
is
never
crazy.
think. That's so crazy.
Yeah,
when I worked with
God.
Bob Andy, like, no big deal. He's he's only a legend.
No,
Yeah.
it was fantastic because when I did get that job from Ross Records, I had been working in the warehouse. I had made really good friends with a Jamaican buddy of mine, Carson, who is in the story. And I remember we'd been packing, 6 months. I'm sitting here packing records and shipping them out, and we're listening to music. And there's a calendar that we just check off the dates on, and all of a sudden I'm looking at it one day, and in the calendar I noticed it's Tuff Gong Music, Kingston, Jamaica. And I said, it's Bob Marley's company. I said, Dr. Dredd, and Carson, what do you think if I went down there for a few months to do like an internship or work for them? Carson's like, no way, Henry, you're not ready for Kingston. Because we used to go out for patties to like the neighborhoods in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I'd get nervous just going down in there to the Jamaican areas. And he was like, I don't think you're ready for Kingston. But Dr. Dredd made the call, and Mrs. Marley, it was a really strange, interesting time for Tuff Gong, because it was in between, at the time, how it worked out, the courts had intervened and taken over the Marley estate. It was basically, there was Bob Marley didn't leave a will. He died in 81. And for 5 or 6 years, it was just, went through a whole bunch of, all kinds of controversy. And eventually the Jamaican government stepped in and actually took over Bob Marley's estate. And Mrs. Marley was in the process of trying to get it back. She eventually teamed up with Island Records and Chris Blackwell, who owned his, the best of his catalog as well as publishing, and had the money to do it. But it was very shaky. There was a lot of other, Sony wanted to buy the Marley estate. Eddie Grant, the singer from Bahamas, had a bid in. I think MCA Records. And the Jamaican government and the guy running it was they assigned a guy to kind of oversee the studio and the whole premises, and he was like this government guy named Raoul Thompson, a really hard ass colonel who had no love of Rasta or reggae or anything. He was just a guy just appointed to oversee, and he was being really tough on them. But luckily for me, amazingly enough, I get down to Tuff Gong. Mrs. Marley gives me the opportunity, and it's in this kind of weird state of trying to figure out who runs it. And Mrs. Marley was still the general manager, but she had to go through the board appointed by the Jamaican courts. And when I get there, I tell in the podcast, I'm waiting for Keith Anderson. He's the A&R director and the creative guy who they bring in to kind of revive Tuff Gong now, and they want to create it. They want to turn it from Bob Marley's label into a general label. They're putting out some of the kids' music. They want to make it so it's kind of viable out there, other than just being known for Bob Marley. That was Bob Marley's dream, to make Tuff Gong a distribution company, for all of Jamaica and for ghetto kids and stuff like that.
Right.
So I get down there to work for the A&R director. Of course, doesn't show up till like 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm sitting, I got there early because I was excited. I took the first plane out of Miami. I was like there at 8 o'clock in the morning. I had duffel bags with me, guitar, boombox, and I'm sitting in the lobby. And there's a gentleman sitting, right next to me. He's got a saxophone on his lap. He's an older guy, very, very, stiff and, hands folded, great posture, just staring at a wall. It's like, he almost looks like a military musician, and I see his saxophone case has a Bob Marley sticker on it. So I asked him, I said, you're a saxophone player? He says, yeah, my name's Deadly Headley. And it turns out Deadly Headley turns out to be one of the greatest, saxophone players in Jamaican history. He started out with the Alpha Boys band and Studio One, Cox and Dodd, Revolutionaries, just a handful of the best backing bands. And this is like the first guy I met in Jamaica. And I said, Deadly Headley?
That's crazy.
Because not only, I always say, not only is he the greatest, he also has the greatest name. I mean, Deadly Headley is just...
Deadly Headley.
Yeah, it's just top of the line. And he is deadly. I think Sly Dunbar gave him the nickname and said just because he's a sharpshooter. He just doesn't miss, So me and Headley have lunch. At the Tuff Gong has a commissary. They give you little tickets. That was part of my deal. I wasn't getting paid, but I had a room and I had meals. And I didn't realize the meals were just tickets, to the commissary there. But it was great. I mean, jerk chicken and the best kind of food you could possibly imagine.
I mean, that's a wild opportunity right there.
Yeah, that really is.
So then we grab lunch, and then Headley said, I said, who are you here to meet? He says, Bob Andy. I said, Bob Andy, the singer from Studio One's here? He goes, yeah. I said, I'm here to see, I said, at some point I figured out, I'm here to see Keith Anderson. He said, Keith Anderson is Bob Andy. And I said, you mean I'm going to be working for Bob Andy down here, the singer? He said, yeah. So it turns out that, they really wanted to have credibility. So Bob Andy, this great classic singer, they brought him in to be their A&R director, kind of to guide their new label, to sign new artists and to kind of, build it up. And it turns out he was the guy I ended up working for. So it was just like one thing after the next thing. So for the next few months, I kind of shadowed him, as he rolled around Kingston, signing new artists, bringing them into the Tuff Gong studio. He was also recording his own album at the time because part of his deal was that he got to use their premises. So, all the great engineers, Errol Brown, were all there working on the material. And it was like, I was just like, like you guys would be a kid in a candy store in heaven.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, who the flip is this kid?
Yeah.
They had no idea who I was. Like this kid walking around the place, like I had run of the place. And, the engineers were all very scared. No one wanted, they thought I was a spy or who knows what. Yeah. People are looking at me,
God.
Rita Marley's Rastafarian crew were like, what the heck is this guy walking around here for? And, it was just a blast. And it was just such a great opportunity. And then, just mentoring and being mentored by Bob Andy and following in his footsteps for that amount of time was just incredible, eye-opening.
Now we're talking early to mid 90s. Is that right?
This is now 86, 87.
Oh, okay. Okay, so even earlier.
So I was still in college. So basically I was just graduating. I had, and then from that, I didn't move to Jamaica yet. I actually had gone back to New York where the next step was I had gotten a job working for Island Records.
Right.
Now, I had I had been at Tuff Gong, I'd worked for Ross Records, and then like everybody else in the music business, I wanted to have a reggae band and I wanted a record deal. I mean, who doesn't, right?
Yep.
I was down in Jamaica,
Exactly.
I saw these record. So, I went in with my band from high school, my singers. We went in, we did some demo tapes up in New York, and I was lucky enough on that project to work at a very famous studio called D&D Studios, which is on the West Side. It's really an iconic hip hop studio. A lot of the East Coast, Biggie Smalls, Jay-Z, Black Moon, that kind of whole East Coast 80s, 90s hip hop scene were out of there. But they also had a very good connection with Dennis Brown and the reggae and Dennis Brown's management. So on my demo project, it was produced by a great percussionist named Larry McDonald, who is also a classic reggae guy who toured with Gil Scott-Heron. And Sidney Mills, who also plays a lot he did with Steel Pulse. He's another great producer. So we were young coming in, but we had a really good crew of people working with us and, working at the studio in D&D and shopping it around and, sent it out to probably 20 labels, 30 labels. And I mean, if I got 2 answers, I was lucky. And, one of I'll never forget, one of it was a guy, Brian Koppelman. I don't know if that name sounds familiar. He ended up writing like Ocean's 11. He became a very big screenwriter, but his claim to fame was that when he was his father was a very famous publisher, Koppelman Publishing. When he was in college in Boston, he saw an act at a local bar named Tracy Chapman, and he said that she's great, and he brought her to Arista Records, got her a deal. The rest is history. Yep. So he ends up getting an A&R gig working for the big label. And I said, oh my God, this guy's definitely he's going to get my music. He signed Tracy Chapman and the whole thing. I got a letter back that's saying that, and the worst thing is when you send these demo tapes back in the day to the record labels, the most humiliating thing is they actually send them back to you. It's like, not only do we not want you, but we don't even want this in the office. So there's any kind of impression that if anything comes out even close to it or remotely resembling it, that you claim that this is, our fault.
So,
they sent it back and they said, this was like the only reply I got from all these labels. I think he said, it doesn't fit into our catalog. It sounds a little cutesy and contrived. And I was like, ooh, that is just brutal. So at that point, I'm like, all right, let me get out my resumes and see what's next on the list. So it was pretty discouraging.
That's crazy. No, honey, that's all so crazy. Like, I mean, that had to feel so surreal being down there in this environment. And also, like, I feel like when you went down there, I mean, Bob passed 81, and you first were in Kingston, what was that, 85, 86?
Yeah, 85, 86.
So they're probably still fresh going through the different transitions of like what's going on down there, what's the scene like, what's the dynamic like between the shock of the loss and everything. Like things probably were still shaky, and then here you come to just do your thing, to just ruffle these feathers even more. Like how long would you say it was when you were there until things started to really feel like normal? Like it was like, okay, good, like this works, like everything is clicking for you.
Well, I think again, Bob Andy was instant credibility in some kind of way,
That's fair.
It's like when you're rolling around with someone with that status and that reverence, I mean, and people just assume that you're connected to him. Mm-hmm. So, I learned pretty quickly. I started feeling, pretty confident just, and then people kind of knew me as his second around there. So even when he wasn't around,
that's great.
I had made my crew. And then, it's also what was going on. The whole dynamic of living in Jamaica is, yes, what's going on in Tuff Gong is amazing during the day. I think Julian Marley had just come into the fold and he was recording his first album there. Bob Andy had signed a group named The Bibles that was a trio from Waterhouse. And I tell the story in the podcast, but one of the first days, he takes me to Waterhouse, which is, a pretty rough neighborhood in Kingston. It's a garrison area. Mm-hmm. And, I just remember, because, I'd gone to Negril and spring break like a lot of people. And, you hear the stories about Kingston, but we just rolled into Waterhouse and we went to this neighborhood and where the band The Bibles was waiting. They were waiting for him to come. And I mean, this is like my first, second or day in Kingston. And all of a sudden, like here we are in this yard in the ghetto, and there's like a trio auditioning a cappella.
Mm-hmm.
You
That's
know,
sad.
and like in a half-finished house with cement blocks all around it, and I'm like having goosebumps. I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm here. You know, and they're saying, I still even remember the song. It was called Punky Reggae Beat, and eventually he did sign them. They went into Tuff Gong and they recorded the song. But I mean, it was just those kind of moments that, you know, and again,
That's
I
so
just
great.
recall right back to the day. You know, he had signed this 16-year-old singer named Yvette Grant, who was a, you know, a gospel sensation. And there was a band from California actually called the Rebel Rockers who were down there recording. Probably one, I guess, a really early, you know, California reggae band. This was, you know, early 80s they had been around,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow.
But Tuff Gong, the reason I got in is because Tuff Gong was trying very, very hard to get into the U.S. market. And I had just worked all these months for Ross Records, learning about distribution, about the record, you know, about the way the records are marketed, about doing the press releases. So they were really hoping I could kind of inject some of that, you know, U.S. kind of foreign vibe into what was going on with what they were doing. They were starting to produce music that they thought could work into the international market.
Right. I can't imagine what that was like, seeing that a cappella audition of this band, The
No.
Bibles. I mean, that is probably exactly how it was with the Wailing Souls or the Paragons, or, you know, any of these vocal groups. They probably started out just like that, and you saw what it was really like. I mean, I can't even fathom what that's like.
It's raw passion, man. That's just crazy.
Well, again, I think, I don't know if you guys saw the Bob Marley movie, and I think they did a very good job representing it, you know, rehearsing, then finally getting the chance to, you know, to audition.
That
You know,
studio
this,
one.
yeah, I mean, this, even when I was in Kingston in '86, okay, you know, you had Tuff Gong music, you know, you had jammies, you had, you know, Penthouse is very big, Gussie Clark, Music Works, you know, you had a lot of some of the early iconic ones were still around the place, but there were a dozen studios in Kingston and 1,000 or 2,000 aspiring singers. So it wasn't the day where everybody had a Pro Tools rig in their closet and you could go in and spend all day recording and getting it right and cut and pasting it. This was a day, even up to my time, when in order to get even your foot in the studio, in order to get that valuable time, you had to be ready. You had one chance, and it was all about, you know, rehearsing and getting it right, and just taking that opportunity and being able to run with it. You know, it was just a completely different time, and people took it very, very seriously when they were rehearsing. And you could see with these, even with the Bibles, you know, I could say you can see this was their spot. They had sung this same song, if not 1,000 times in that same spot. The harmonies, the two guys, the lead, you know, this was their moment. You know, and Bob Andy was there and ready to hear it, and he saw it. You know,
And to sing just for Bob Andy and say, "Hey, is this good?"
Yeah.
That's also very nerve-wracking.
Yes, and he was very critical of people too. I know. I also talk about it. The kids finished, and Bob Andy didn't speak.
Yeah. I
He
can't
sat there
imagine
for a
what that's
while.
like.
You know, and they're looking around. Their fathers in the crowd. You know, he takes a deep breath. You know, he was a man who took his comments and his words very, very, you know, seriously. And before he said something, he thought about it. You know, he didn't want to give the wrong answer. But, you know, all those little moments were just teaching moments for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everything you just went through is kind of a great teaser for, you know, season 1 of Rootsland. For anyone listening who hasn't listened to the podcast, I mean, you go into much, much greater detail in the podcast. So if you're interested in anything we're talking about right now, definitely go check out Rootsland podcast for sure. But I did want to segue into Kingston to Cali, which is a limited series, which you did this year. Also fascinating, just like a different branch of that. What made you, you know, decide to do a one-off podcast like that?
Well, basically because I still have so much roots, and I had been traveling so much to Jamaica. You know, I would say the actual genesis or the origin probably happens when Soulja wins the Grammy.
Sure.
I guess that's 2022 or 2021. You know, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I think what was somewhere around there, right?
Yeah, one of those.
But anyway, I just saw the reaction in the Jamaican press. I mean, first of all, it's very harsh. American band, white band, foreign band. It's just as harsh as they were on someone else winning the Grammy other than a Jamaican entertainer. They were hard on themselves, maybe. How do we let this happen? Very self-reflective.
Sure.
And, me, someone, again, I'm not deeply involved in the Cali roots or the American reggae scene. So maybe I've heard of Soja because they've been around for so long. But so maybe, it entered my radar too. And I said, wait a second, let me take a listen to this record. So I want to be able to be educated when I speak to people. Let me see what's going on with this Cali roots thing. Because then a year or two later, there was an article in the Jamaican Gleaner that, the band Stick Figure knocks Bob Marley out of the #1 spot on the reggae Billboard chart.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I noticed the comments on that, and, the Jamaican bloggers and vloggers and social influencers starting to post their things, negative things about America. This is not real reggae. And this kind of schism begins to kind of form between Jamaican reggae fans who are real authentic fans of roots reggae and kind of like the Cali roots and American reggae people. I'm saying there's a lot that are in the middle, but the extremists, let's say on both sides, start to kind of wedge in and say, wait a second, you don't know what's going on here. And that's where I started really paying attention to it. And I said, you know what? This is worth taking a look at, exploring, Cali roots in terms of, and I talk about it in the podcast. If you look at the Billboard, or you look at the iTunes top 40 charts, as I did an episode, there wasn't one Jamaican act in the top 40 other than Bob Marley. He had 3 or 4 records. It was all American, Cali roots bands. In terms of touring, what goes on. Revolution, Stick Figure, these tours that go on, Dirty Heads, Tribal Seeds. These are those tours that are dominating the reggae genre right now.
Right.
Every once in a while they'll throw a Steel Pulse or a Kabaka Pyramid or Protege on there. But, these are basically American reggae tours. And then you look at the festivals as Cali Roots or Cali Vibes that are, earning $20, $30, $40 million a year, on their festivals. And again, yes, reggae has progressed, but at the core foundation, this is all because of reggae music, Jamaica, and let's say Bob Marley. These are the foundation for everything that's going on. So I decided to do a limited series to just follow the path, because California, more than any other state, probably has the reggae's influence had spread the quickest and the first. Mm-hmm. So I kind of wanted to dive into that. And I do in terms of that, that has a lot to do with the Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia and the Deadheads and kind of like this hippie movement that adopts the Rastafarian ethics and ethos and this kind of one love spiritual connection. And then I follow it through to basically Sublime and kind of the reggae rock as the, basically the catalyst for really what's been created now in terms of, like I said, this dominating Cali roots, California, American reggae scene.
Right. And it also goes into the question of appropriation versus appreciation. And, how do you measure that? And what Sublime did, was it one or the other? It's really not really answered. And we're not going to speak ill of any artists out there, especially any artists that are currently making music. Because that's not what we're about. So we're not going to name names or anything like that. But
and I don't really do that either in the show.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned Sublime, using Half Pint songs. They use a lot of songs, but was it appreciation or was it appropriation? And it's such a fine line, and it's nobody can really answer when it's that fine of a line. I mean, when it's obvious, but
yeah, no. In terms, again, without spreading any negativity at all to the not taking I'm trying not to take anything away from Sublime, but really what I want to do is I want to add to Half Pint's resume in the whole
Of
picture.
course. Yeah.
Half Pint was one of the when I moved to Jamaica, and I rented a house up in the hills. One of the very first artists who we were friends with who came by the place was Half Pint. Just such a progressive, easygoing, positive kid. It's just a joy to be around, you know. And at the time, I do tell this story. I mean, not many people know this, but you know, the Rolling Stones covered one of his songs on their album,
Which is wild.
You know, yeah, which is a wild thing, and the whole thing was just very sketchy. There were other producers and writers, and everybody, you know, got their hands on it. So I kind of always had this kind of sensitive spot for an artist like Half Pint, and you know, again, not taking anything away. Maybe Sublime didn't know he sung the song. Maybe they did. You know, originally he did not get credit for, as everybody knows, "Loving You" was a hook from Half Pint's song, but you know, really, without even addressing that, what I really want to do is pay homages to Half Pint. You know, Half Pint basically being an artist that can write a hook like "Loving You Is What I Got," that can cross over to a genre, and you can say what you want about a lot of those, every rock reggae band or American reggae band out right now, but you know, no one's had a hit to that magnitude yet, and I do give Half Pint a lot of credit for coming up with a catchy, amazing hook that was able to propel that song. So, you know, appreciation, appropriation, it doesn't matter to me. You know, the fact is that, you know, I'm just proud that Half Pint, you know, is able to now, you know, get his royalties and take credit for the fact that he wrote a, you know, a #1 hit.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if this is everybody's journey, but Sublime is one of those bands that got me into reggae and got me listening to Half Pint, Barrington Levy, Tenor Saw. You know, once you start hearing the original songs, you're like, oh, who else did they sample? Who else did they cover? Oh, this song, you know, Toots. And, you know, you just go down the line. And for me, that opened the door to reggae. But I don't know if everyone else has that same sort of journey, or they're just like, yeah, Sublime music is really cool, and it ends there, you know?
Yeah, you know, I think basically it's everything at once. You know, you have the hardcore reggae fans who will look at it negatively. You'll have Sublime, you know, fanatics who will say that you know, Sublime is original in what they did and they just helped these reggae bands. And then you'll have a lot of people in the middle like you who, and I hear it all the time, especially since I've been doing the podcast, is they say, listen, say what you want about Sublime, but I got into reggae because of them. End of the discussion. I probably wouldn't have listened to a lot of those artists if I never even, you know, heard the Sublime. And then again, take it as, you can take it as a diss or you can take it as a compliment. When I do say about Bradley Nowell and his ability, I said he was a musical genius, whether you want to admit it or not, because of his ability to be able to identify, sample, interlope, borrow, however you want to put it, the very best of reggae. The best hooks, the best bass lines, the best punches, the best little DJ parts. I mean, he had a radar for coming up with things that were just very catchy and hooky and easy to remember. And he was able to pull it out and put it into his musical montage in this mixtape era. And you know, you can say something to that. There is a genius to that.
Yeah, for sure. And
It's true.
the way he does it, and he can sing, and he can play, you know, there was a lot of magic happening all at once and at the right time. They just hit the right market at the right time in the right location.
And a generation too, like a certain generation of people, including us, you know, because they were very kind of pivotal for us to be able to kind of get into reggae and to even be curious enough to go down the different rabbit holes that exist with reggae, you know.
Right.
So that bridge right there definitely stands for itself, but definitely comes with its own little set of questions, you know. I mean, of course, I feel like every single time something grows or changes and moves in a different direction, there are growing pains. It happens. It happens every single time an iPhone gets updated and I watch my mother try to figure out how to use a phone again. You know what I mean? Like, yes, that update suits me very well in my business, but everyone else that was using the old version is absolutely ticked off because they have to relearn. And it's so hard. And it's so interesting to kind of see that and see that over time. Bridging those connections is what's really making the reggae culture and what's making the music spread to the audiences. That is really what's at the heart of everything that we're even doing here in terms of podcasting.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a sliding scale because again, what's acceptable, what's norm, what's, feels right in 1996 or 97, all of a sudden 2017 was like, wait, was that right? Was that normal? And you end up questioning yourself,
Exactly.
but you just go with your instinct and your gut and if it feels right, it feels right. And yes, when you say bridging, when I went out as part of the podcast, I went out to Cali Roots, and I was really impressed and surprised and enjoyed the audience. The youth, the energy, the families, the strollers, the openness. It was a whole new generation. It was not what I was expecting. I was kind of expecting more of, I don't know, more of like a Fish or Grateful Dead or kind of like a hippie-ish. And it was a little more urban. It was a little more, ethnic, Latin and Asian and Polynesian. It felt like, little b-boy and the, tattoos and black shorts and high tops and black teeth. And it was a pleasure. They really loved the music regardless of what it was. Again, my criticism, it's not negativity. It's just, there were 5 Jamaican acts out of 30 on it. 4 of them were Marleys. And one of them was Burning Spear. I think Kabaka's Pyramid was on it too at an early point. But, my regret is just, oh my God, I wish this audience could really see something else besides this kind of what they always see, reggae from Jamaica. I'm not slighting the Cali Roots artists or the American reggae. I'm just saying I wish there was an injection of some real hardcore Jamaican ghetto artists or bands that, can show an audience what's going on in Jamaica now on the streets. And I love the Marleys. My loyalty to them is undying because Rita Marley gave me my first, real job in the business. And I love Junior Gong and I love every Marley brother. And I always say that. But, and I think I'd said it in Kingston to Cali, I mean, as great as the Marleys are, they're all elites, everyone in that family. But does any one of their top-level tunes even come close to like Bob's mid-level tunes? There's something that, it's not in the DNA, obviously. Because Bob Marley has something that is so exceptional that he could have 15 kids, 10 of them incredible artists, yet none of them could really touch his catalog.
Well, I mean, he lived it. He lived the struggle, and he made a name for himself. Not putting down anything that
no, which is exactly what I say, which is what I said when I went to Cali Roots. I wish these people could see someone who lived the struggle,
right?
Because they're not seeing that. They're not seeing that, and it's no disrespect. I love the Marley Show, and I love the homage, and I love what they do, but you're not seeing a performance of a band who lived the flippin' struggle. Who's living the struggle.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
and
a big difference.
That's it is. And like, even like now, I feel like the audience and the demographic that listens to reggae, it has expanded even from when we were in college to now. Like, it's getting a lot bigger. But the music is reaching people, but necessarily like the foundational message and the culture behind it is the part that kind of gets overshadowed as more time and distance gets put between it, because they associate so much of the struggles and what's happening in Jamaica, I feel like, with the Bob Marley era, and you feel like we're moving away from that, and there is not a lot of light showing on like, where is it today? Because I'm sure there are so many bands that are there that are currently in the struggle and living the life and putting the name out for themselves. But you talk about music in general and the platform of music, and to be able to get a name of recognition and backing behind you, that is such a difficult thing now. I mean, that was a difficult thing back then when Bob did it, which is why it's so miraculous that we can sit here and talk about his incredible catalog. But for bands to get there on that stage and to have that platform and that visibility, now it's next to near impossible with what bands have to even sacrifice to even make that happen for themselves. It's like, what is that best route? What are the different ways? What are the platforms? What are the ways that bands and that awareness can be merged and intertwined with the culture and the music that's currently spreading?
Okay, so what can we do to kind of take these artists, these unseen, unheard artists that are, right now working away, trying to, break out of these tenements or ghettos of Kingston. In the Kingston to Cali podcast, I do not put any of the blame on what's happening in reggae and the dominance of the American scene on American reggae bands at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not one bit, because
Right.
From when I moved to Jamaica in 1986, till pretty much 2012, 13, when I basically left there, it was the same story that Bob Andy and Deadly Headley and Half Pint and Eddie Fitzroy and a lot of these friends and mentors had been telling me. They said, Henry, look, dancehall music, the computer rhythms, Shaba, Yellow Man, Ninja Man, Supercat, it's great. The kids love it. It's got a great energy. But there's going to be a price that's going to be paid up the road. You wait and see. You'll see what happens. And, now is the price that's being paid, because once Sling Ting rhythm, which I talk about in Kingston to Cali, once computer rhythms and digital rhythms started coming into play and it became less expensive, every studio started opening, dancehall music started coming into play. Shabba Ranks gets the Grammys by 90, 91. Nobody wants to be a musician anymore in Jamaica, in Kingston. These kids that used to idolize, stand outside Studio One, just look at these musicians with their instruments going in and out. They're not interested in learning that anymore. They want to be DJs. They want to be Shabba. They want to, that's easy. They don't have to learn anything. They just got to put down some lyrics and sit on a rhythm and practice all day. It doesn't take the discipline. They don't have to learn keys or pitch or harmonies. So what happened was, yes, forget about dancehall lyrics or slackness or, the message it was sending. The message it was sending into Jamaica was, you don't have to be singers or musicians. You can be entertainers without having to do that. You can be DJs. Or if a singer just ride on a one-chord rhythm, you don't need any, real talent to do something like that. And what happened is 20 years later, after the wave of bands, the great reggae bands of, let's say, Black Uhuru and the Mighty Diamonds and the Wailing Souls and Burning Spear and Third World, and all these bands kind of, who came after them? There was a gap. There was a generation gap from the 80s till now where it didn't pay to be a reggae band anymore. And what happened in the United States now, these little bands like Steel Pulse or Third World or Mighty Diamonds, they got too big to play, clubs or the reggae night over at the Vermont, hangout. Mm-hmm. So who filled those spots? American reggae bands. They were willing to get into their vans. They were willing to do the work, tour the country from Florida to Vermont, for no money at all. The Sojas and the John Brown Bodies and, all these early American reggae bands who kind of paved the way. And it wasn't because they were taking work away from Jamaican artists. There was no Jamaican artist in that club.
Right.
To play that club. No one was going to come up and pay a club for $500 from Kingston. Just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. And those bands were very heavily influenced by Foundation reggae.
Oh, yes, because this was the generation that grew up on Marley and Steel Pulse and all those great reggae bands that they saw and all those tours and festivals.
Right.
Like you guys, I'm sure. You know?
Yeah.
So I always put the blame, because there were people in Jamaica like these people, like Bob Andy, who were screaming, saying, no, listen, labels, you have to be balanced. You can't put everything into dancehall. We need to keep promoting culture music and Rasta music and reggae. This is what people love around the world. This is what, this is the winning formula here. Why are we even deviating from it? But no, the record companies said, oh, no, we want the next Shabba. So they're going to sign Cobra. They want the next Cobra, so they're going to sign Ninja. They want the next Ninja, so they're going to sign, Supercat. And then it becomes this kind of spiral where all the money gets to go into dancehall, and there's no one left for a young roots band. And there were lots when I was in Jamaica. Great band called the Mystic Revealers. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Never.
They were a little band. A little band. Billy Mystic was from Bull Bay. He has a surf school now, like the full package. In fact, there was early talk on in the 90s that he was going to play Bob Marley in a movie. Had the sound, had the look, surfing Rasta, had kids in a surf camp. Band that had catchy tunes like crazy. Rasta ended up distributing the first record, but there was no record company that wanted to sign them. They were interested in the club music at that point in the 90s. So, we had this kind of long period of time, and now to go full circle, and my solution, I think the only solution is now, is to pull it back down to American reggae and Cali roots, because it's on you guys now. Because you have the money, you have the audience, you have the distribution, you have the labels, you have the management. You got to help come down there, get some of these kids and expose them to your audience, because that's the only way it's going to happen. Jamaica's failed. They don't even know what they're doing. They're running around, with chickens without heads when it comes to music. Now, you really want to show you love the music and you revere it, it's your turn. I gave the analogy. It's kind of true. Remember in Forrest Gump, when the big storm comes and Forrest is the only boat that's left that's shrimping.
Yep.
And like he gets all of a sudden, like every boat is washed up on shores but his, and he's the only one out there that's collecting the shrimp. Well, American reggae is collecting the shrimp right now. They're Forrest Gump. They're the only one out there. There's no one out there doing it. So I feel like, and again, I see these bands, they do feature artists on their records. Usually they're big established artists, or, the young hot Kabakas or Proteges or Lilas or whoever is the artist of the moment. But, it's up to all of us to dig a little bit deeper.
Right.
And say, all right, we love this music. We need to preserve it. Because it's not a situation, the thing that killed reggae, even in dancehall, is, and every Jamaican artist will tell you, it's a crab in a barrel attitude. It's where you have this attitude, all right, there's only a limited amount of space, and we got to be the guy that crawls out of the barrel and gets that deal. And if we don't, then someone else is it. That's never been the case.
Right.
The thing with reggae is people don't understand, the more talent, the more hits, the more artists that come out of Jamaica, the better it is for everybody. It's not just one artist. If we have a whole movement coming out of there, that's going to help American reggae. If all of a sudden the entire world is talking about, oh my God, reggae is just, captivating and coming alive in Jamaica, and everybody's talking about reggae, you think it's going to hurt, American reggae bands that 2 or 3 bust artists comes out of Kingston? No, I think that, again, you have to, I don't want to see, and my one criticism, again, of the Cali roots, and not to holding firm with the ethos of the show, not to diss anybody, but I just feel like it's also in a lot of ways replicated, and it's a warning. What's going on with American reggae in a lot of ways replicated what I see going on in the Jamaican music scene, where you have a few select amount of people, a few who control a lot of the market. They think they know best, so they're going to kind of be gatekeepers in a way. And it hurts in the end. And I don't want to see American reggae come the same route as Jamaican reggae, where it's not like that. You don't have to hold anybody back to keep your artists moving forward. The more that come with the flow, the wave, it really is the better for everyone. I mean, the concept of the rhythm in Jamaica, where you have a bunch of artists on one rhythm.
Yep.
When they put out a rhythm,
like a mixtape.
Sometimes you listen to a song on a rhythm. Sometimes you're driving in the car and you Sling Ting or a Stalag or some old rhythm comes on, a song comes on, and you're like, yeah, this is pretty good, but I'd like to hear the whole rhythm with like 10 songs on it, because it kind of sounds naked and empty, just one song, It's okay, but when I hear a medley of 5 or 6 or 7 songs on one rhythm, and it changes from DJ to singer to sing J and tempos and styles, that kind of adds to the whole thing. It's like just one song is boring at that point. 10 songs is exciting. So
It paints a bigger picture.
I feel like that's exactly the case, and I feel like it's like that with reggae in general. We paint the biggest picture as possible, and it brings everybody along for the ride.
Well, to speak to that, I think that's the beauty of what we're doing here, and also what you do with your podcasting and the stories that you have to tell. It is this sense of community, and it is this sense of awareness, because, I definitely, if I put myself in the situation of an artist that was at the top of what was happening in American reggae and the train was moving, I would imagine that my life would be just tunnel vision of what the hell is next, what am I doing, and how do I keep this up, and how do I maintain this? I think there's a level of unawareness at the top of how broadening that community and the extension of that will really help just rejuvenate the love of reggae, not only just here, but also in Jamaica, and that's a really cool thing that we can do, is like help bring awareness to this in these big bands. Because if there are any of these big bands that listen to us and want to know what the fans would love to see and what would actually fuel the community of reggae, is bridging that gap. That's where these messages kind of come out to help that. I could imagine it's got to be difficult to find all those artists right now in Jamaica that are doing this too. And that would be another question that I do have. How could people find the artists that are doing this over there, including ourselves? Because I know for us, and what we would want to do on future episodes would be promote these people, find them, talk about what they're doing. I have no idea who the hell they are and where they are. Where can we find them, and what is the list?
Well, okay, a couple of things that they're around. Right now, they're hard because you have to go on YouTube, and you have to kind of do the searches and see. But
it's a work.
But spoiler alert: Rootsland season 8 and 9, and as we move in, as I've done Kingston to Cali, and as I've been reflective about everything going on and pointing fingers at this and that, it doesn't feel justified. It doesn't feel like it means anything unless I'm gonna be part of the solution myself. So I've already gone ahead, and I've made some plans. I'm planning on going into Jamaica and going back to Jamaica, but going deeper into the ghettos, going to look for these artists, go to the schools and the high schools. I think what we may do for one season, because again I have my studio in Jamaica with my partners down there, is kind of do something where maybe we get some kids, we go through the Jamaican media, we get some kids to do submissions via YouTube or whatever. Not only singing, but I'm also looking to set up a scholarship for a podcaster. A Jamaican podcaster, a storyteller.
Love it.
A young kid who's in school somewhere, who has some talent, who I can just say, look, this is a medium out there. This is a platform that's worth exploring. We're going to go around to the schools and say, look, 3-4 minutes, send a submission. And if we like it, we're going to bring you into the studio, and we're going to record you, and we're going to put it out. We're going to take all that for you. So it's like I said, it's everything's a circle. To go back to the beginning of the conversation where you say, how do you plan out an episode, or how long does it take? Because that's kind of where we started. And, it's a lot of it is jazz. A lot of it's improvisation. And you do one episode, and then it goes to the next episode. Today, I'm going to be dropping an episode on Vybz Kartel, who was just released from prison. Right. I don't know if you know this story about, he did 14 years for murder, and because of some, irregularities during the trial, he's now free, and it's the biggest story in Jamaica. It's probably something I wouldn't have covered, except 10 years of my life in Kingston was in the dancehall community, and it was during this period that Vybz Kartel had his rise to glory. So I felt like I had to just give my opinion on it. Even though dancehall is not really my main forte or passion, but this is a cultural thing. But so exactly. So going back, sometimes you can prepare, and as I got to the end of this season and Kingston to Cali, I just felt like, I keep talking and I keep talking, and I feel like I'm droning on, and unless I can somehow go down there and do something to kind of resolve what my complaints are, because I've really been harsh on the Jamaican industry. If they've given me a fight for many years, they've given my artists I've worked with for fight many years. So I've seen, in depth how it works. And again, I do blame them for what's going on right now. And the lack of I mean, I said it in one of the episodes. I mean, these schools in Jamaica, I mean, do they teach these kids what reggae music is? How powerful of a medium it is throughout the world? That like every country there are clubs and bars and bands. There was a whole generation of Jamaicans who got out of the ghetto as writers and producers and musicians. Do these kids know that? They don't have to work in phone centers, or they don't have to, work in a bank, that they have the option, that this music is huge, So I feel like the system has failed them.
And you know what's great about this though is like your drive and your passion for your mission to drive results and to get things done. I feel like that's something that we all kind of share. It's one of the reasons that's a driving force as to why we consistently do this and juggle our schedules and make this stuff work, But on a deeper sense of that, you talk about your story and through your podcast and even a little bit of what we talked about here. It seems so much of you are able to do this and make these differences because you made really tough decisions to just do something, leave and do these crazy things. And it opened up more doors and more opportunities for you to get a hand into something and to make a difference. And this next chapter of the differences that you want to make, it's been great that it's been able to kind of circle into us in this episode today too, which is why if there's any way too that we can help in furthering that, where when you find, this is the beautiful thing about the Rootfire partnership now, right? We can do anything. If you send us a YouTube video, we can feature a YouTube video and talk about a little bit what's going on in Jamaica and have that be something that can consistently be here to put that out there. Me as a piano teacher, if there's master classes that I can donate to kids in Jamaica on how can we get the basics of learning piano and what we can do, and if you can be that foothold for me to be able to help in those areas, that would be one of the biggest honors of my life. So the people we meet and the circles we run into and the passion we have is something that can connect the thread and truly make a difference in not only the world, but the world of reggae, which is what we're here to do. So I love that. And I love the passion that you drive yourself with, man. It's something that's inspiring me to want to be involved and be able to help spread that word and help the culture as well, too. It's incredible.
Yeah,
well
keep
you
us in mind.
You are involved and you are spreading the culture. I listen to the shows, so I mean, some of it's pretty in depth with what you do. But and just on a note to Rootfire, I said it earlier, but I just really want to emphasize again. They supported me early in my podcast. Reed Foster, Dave Schiffman, his writing is incredible. I love what he does over there. James Searle, who's a bass player as well, a musician. He's a gifted writer. Yep. They've all contributed and helped me out in putting my stories together. Zeb, the drummer from Tribal Seeds, as
Great
well.
guy.
Had a great conversation with him. He was really willing to step up and contribute and help me out and give me a perspective of what's going on in the Cali roots scene. So I mean, the people are out there, but like what you said earlier, it's not that they don't know or they're unaware. You know how being a musician is. A touring musician, it is just so tough. It is so demanding. You don't even have time to think about what's for breakfast, let alone putting these big picture things together about worrying about breaking a new artist out of Kingston and trying to help this guy out. You're trying to get to the show, not get caught in traffic, the next gig. So, we all get bogged down in these day-to-day things, and sometimes that kind of clouds us from seeing a big picture. And like you said, maybe sometimes you just have to point when you have them and you're sitting down with them, you can just say, hey, here's an idea.
That's the beauty of it. It is, and like I said, man, anything we can do that helps this mission, then when you move forward, if you see any pockets of opportunities down there, definitely reach out to us and let us know. Anything I can do in terms of music education, things like that, because it is a system. I mean, we can talk circles around the school systems here and what should be taught, what shouldn't be taught, what's working, what isn't working. That's a 10-hour long podcast in itself, right? But it's a matter of, there's people who care and people who can step in and do something when the opportunities are given. So if your feet are on the ground and hitting the pavement to open up the doors for opportunities, what we can do to help kids or help the education circle kind of come full circle so that more musicians can be musicians and more kids can learn how to communicate what they're feeling through expressing music. I think that's the heart of what I do personally. That's the biggest joy that I have in life, is being able to watch kids learn how to communicate through an instrument. So, I mean, I love that these paths cross. This is why we do this. So anything we can do to help, we are on board.
Yes.
100%. Yeah, I have noticed this. I mean, it's funny because as much criticism as, let's say, American reggae, Soulja or Stick Figure had been getting in Jamaican press or amongst the elite bloggers and influencers. My experience has been time and time again when I'm in Jamaica, when I'm with American artists, white singers, white DJs, the people on the streets love them. They look at it as the ultimate, compliment. When you go to a dance, like a street dance in Kingston, and a white kid takes the mic and tears it up, or a white DJ, who I've worked with plenty of them, really shows the audience that they care and they believe in this music and they pull off a good song, the place goes crazy. They don't look at it as appropriation or, anything like that. They say, oh my God, this person comes from France or Italy or New York City and they love reggae that much that this is how they do it. That's the sentiment on the streets. So I know when I bring down when you want to do a master class with a musician from America or bring down musicians from American bands, people on the streets are going to love it. Artists and musicians are going to love it. Forget about what they're saying, those on top and the elitists and the media, I know what the streets of Jamaica think. I love the reaction of when a foreign artist performs at a street dance. It's amazing.
That's amazing. See, it's the community and it's people with passion, and people recognize passion. I think that's what really kind of ties us all together. Is you can throw every single thing out there that differentiates people, but passion, it shines true, and we resonate with that, and we can relate to that. So as long as the moves that you make are made passionately, then they resonate throughout the community, and they send that ripple effect to create growth and to foster new development and to create the opportunities that we're looking for inside this genre and inside the people who love this genre and just people who want to connect with music in general, because just having that connection to music can change so many aspects of your life.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
which goes back to what I said. What are they really teaching in the schools of Jamaica? Never mind the instruments and the music itself. What are they teaching about this music and what kind of impact it's had on the globe?
Exactly. And then to be able to capitalize and do something with that. But I love it. I love everything that you're doing. I love everything, and the passion that you have behind the stories that you have. I think it's really an amazing thing, and it's really something that can make a difference, which is what's important.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, Henry K., thank you for taking so much of your time. We know you're very busy doing your thing. We have a lot to look forward to with Rootsland, perhaps more offshoots of the podcast, and, this foundation that we talked about, and, teaching and, the scholarship you mentioned. So
definitely,
we're
gonna keep the link, and we're gonna we'll keep it alive. Absolutely,
very much looking forward to that. I hope we can help in some way.
I'm honored that you extend your help and your offer, and like I said, I'll take you up on it. Absolutely,
of course. And if there's anything we could share on our platforms, we'll definitely do that. We'll be in touch for sure.
Okay, then.
It was just a pleasure, man. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your mission, because it's definitely well received. And I definitely look forward to being able to connect and seeing what we can all do together in the future, and being able to kind of feature different things and update the people also on what you're doing and what's going on. When do you think you're going to be going back down there?
I'm actually going to be heading down at the end of August, beginning of September. So pretty soon, just for a little,
awesome.
Just going to a scout trip for a few days.
Perfect.
And I'm gonna go to the Tuff Gongs and some of the old Alpha Boys School, some of the old places, because we want to draw in the real pioneers and the foundation people to anything we do. That's the key.
Cool. Perfect. You'll be there just in time for hurricane season.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, man. Safe travels for you. And again, thank you so much for everything today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys, and keep it up. I know how, like I said, I do podcasts, so I know how time-consuming and difficult and problematic it is at times to set it all up. So I appreciate what you do, and I hope everybody listening appreciates what you guys do, because you put your homework in and the research. And
it's a labor of love, for sure.
So.
Labor of love, man. Absolutely. Thank you, man. We'll talk soon.
All right,
we'll be in touch
later on.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to A Conversation in Dub, hosted by James Pasqua and Mark Raimondi. Conversation in Dub is brought to you by Rootfire, a platform for reggae music worldwide with a mission to empower artists and nurture the community that supports them. You're here because you love reggae music and want to be a part of that community? We're here to help you connect the dots.
This show is produced and edited by James Pasqua. Our theme music is an original composition called Keep Dubbin' by James Pasqua and Mark Ramondi. If you want to hear previous episodes containing full songs, you can find them all on Spotify. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Conversation in Dub. And if you have any feedback, requests, or just want to talk about music, reach out there or email us at aconversationindub@gmail.com. Make sure to rate us on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, keep dubbing.